When you are preparing for something like the Arkansas All-Region auditions this coming year, there is so much music to learn. How are you going to learn all this? There's this exercise, there's another exercise, there's this big chunk of an exercise. You've got sixths, you've got 2 different etudes, and you need to learn the whole thing. So how are you going to go about learning all of that music? Well, practicing is the way that we go about that. And in order to do that, you really have to set your goals. You have to set small goals that gradually become bigger goals. And then you have to work towards achieving those goals. So let's take, for example, in a couple previous videos, I talked about some of the things that you have to do to be able to work through learning your E major thirds. And I'll get that out of the way. Think about some of those goals that you have that you have to be working on. Maybe it's something related to your left hand, and we talked about the left hand control that you need. There's the control you need going through the first register change and how that applies to your left hand. There's the altissimo register. Maybe for some of you that's entirely new, and for others of you, you've been playing altissimo register, but of course we can always get better there. So maybe it's just learning the fingerings, so learning the correct fingerings, and then of course playing the register change in and out of the altissimo register. So those are all goals that you have as you're preparing. But then you need process. You need a way to practice these things. And most of the time, I think that practicing is really kind of like a math and science thing, where there are tried and true methods that we go through every time that can gradually get us to the result that we want, which is our big goal. In this case, play the E major thirds exercise, sounding good at an appropriate speed, consistently playing it correctly, so that when you get into an audition, you can just go onto your muscle memory, autopilot, and as nervous as you are, you can still play a good, credible audition. So what are some of these tried and true methods that we've all done? And I'm sure by now your teachers have told you all of these things, and of course it's up to you to do them at home. But sometimes they lead you through these in rehearsals, don't they? There might be taking smaller bite-sized pieces. So using E major thirds as an example again, we might just play the very first the first 5 notes of that third, or the first register change of that, which takes us through 5 notes of the scale. Maybe on your own in the practice room, in your bedroom at home, you work that section, that very small section, a nice small bite-sized piece of that, and verify that you are doing things correctly that we've talked about. Maybe you work the very small section of the altissimo register change. Maybe you gradually start small and you add notes. You work outward from there, so gradually you're playing more and more. That's tried and true method that will usually work if we're doing it consistently and repeating it over and over again in a correct way. Maybe there's slow it down a lot, and there are different ways you can use your metronome. Of course, slowing it way down and being able to play something really well at a very slow tempo. There is pretty much no substitute for doing something like that. Then there are the ways that we speed it up. I have approaches that I like to take where I take a slow speed and I speed it up a certain number of clicks, maybe 8 clicks on the metronome. And then I play it at that speed, and it usually isn't quite what I want it to be. Then I'll back it up 4. It's sort of like going 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And doing that method almost always helps me build speed when I know how to play something at a slow tempo. Okay? And then of course there is the repetition. Repeating something enough times correctly so that it becomes a habit. And that that turns into a new challenge in certain kinds of music. So, sometimes you'll be learning a piece of music, and there's just something about it that's a little weird. It's a little off. It might sort of seem like a scale for a little bit that you've played before, but then it veers off and starts going up and going down in unexpected ways. And those are the kinds of things that can really take a lot longer and make us feel like it's completely hopeless while we're practicing. So this is where another method that I'd like to introduce to you can really come in handy. And one of these places for me in this year's Arkansas All-Region High School Music is the Etude that's on page 85, number 11, and it's measure 74 in this new edition that we've adopted in the state. There's something about that section, 74 into 75, I don't know what it is. I can look at it and I can figure out kind of what's happening with it or related to music theory. That kind of makes sense to me, but there's something about it that just doesn't like to stick. It's just a little bit odd. So the practice rhythms now. What these practice rhythms are, they're 30 different rhythms and combinations of rhythm with moving the articulation around that are really a great way to learn the correct sequence of notes. They're a really good way to find the patterns that are in that sequence of notes and maybe even discover a few new patterns that you didn't realize were there to begin with. And then, of course, the practice rhythms help you stay focused through many repetitions to help yourself learn the sequence of the notes and make them really stick. So I'm going to put a printable copy of these practice rhythms on my website, and I'll give you the address at the end of the video. Right now, I'm going to show you how you're going to go about using these. And for this, we'll use an example of something that's a little more familiar to you, the F major scale. One flat, not too bad. You've played it quite a bit in your life up till now, I hope. If you haven't, ask your teachers. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you play it. So if you were to take rhythm number 1 on the list of practice rhythms, slur 2, tongue 1, 3/8 notes, if you were to take that rhythm and play the entire F major scale using that rhythm and articulation combination, it would be something like this. So, you can recognize that's the F major scale that you know and you love, and it's just with a little different combination of slurring and tonguing and a little bit of rhythmic difference. It's kind of like you're playing triplets, let's say. What about if we take rhythm 7? The two practice rhythms we've used so far each have 3 pitches in them. Now, by number 12, we add a pitch. So we're still in the same time signature, still a similar rhythmic pattern, but we add a 4th pitch in. Let's go ahead and experiment with the F major scale on rhythm number 14 and see how that works. Sometimes they do end a little funny. It's just part of how they work. Okay, so let's see how to apply these to the Etude. I really prefer the combinations of long notes and short notes. I think that these give us the biggest advantage because they create different combinations of emphasis. Whenever you're playing a long note, you are emphasizing that note a little more in your brain. And when you move the rhythms around, you're emphasizing different notes. So by the time you play through all the rhythms, or even play through 10 of them on this page, you're going to have emphasized every single different note in that passage that you're working on at least once, which is not a bad thing. So let's try rhythm number 12, and let's do that with the notes in measure 74 and 75. So here's rhythm number 5. Let's see what this sounds like. Okay, again, it ends a little weird, and it almost doesn't sound like anything. I mean, it kind of does, but by playing little three note sets, when the original version here, the music on the page, it's really grouped in 4s. So when we're playing 3s, it sounds a little off, okay? And that's all right. Let's see what happens when we use rhythm number 24 now, where we're going to have 4 pitches, so it's going to line up a lot more with what's actually on the page. Here's rhythm 24. Now it's starting to sound a little more like music, like you would expect it to sound. So we're getting a little bit closer. Okay, now, you might have watched this far and you are completely skeptical about this. And you're saying, so wait a minute, you're telling me that you want me to take something that's already challenging, that I'm having trouble with, and essentially make it more difficult by playing it a whole bunch of different ways that aren't even on that page. And the answer is yes, that's exactly what I'm asking you to do. But it really is beneficial. And think about it this way for a moment. If you've had the opportunity to watch a sibling or a relative grow up from the time they were an infant and a toddler and getting older, and watch them learn. And it really is quite remarkable how much they learn from day to day. And one of the ways that their brain does this is their brain is just a sponge, and everything that they are experiencing every moment is practically brand new to them. So they have such a focus about what they are doing and what they're observing, and their senses, their sight, hearing, smell, taste, of course, because they're putting everything in their mouths. All of those senses are just so strong, and they're absorbing as much as they can. Now, when you play practice rhythms in the act of learning music, it opens up your brain to something similar to that, where you are that much more focused, because you play rhythm 1 with this section of music that we just worked on. And then you go back and you play rhythm 2, and play rhythm 3 and rhythm 4 all the way down that page. Or even if you just do 10 of them, every single time that you change to a new rhythm, it's like you're experiencing that passage of music as if it's brand new, and you are having to focus at a much higher level than you might have otherwise. Another advantage is that it's kind of like children's toothpaste, where, hey, if it tastes really good, they might brush longer, right? So this is sort of like children's toothpaste for the practice room, where if you are having to stay really focused, you're going to be interested in doing it for longer. You're not going to get bored as quickly. You're going to be really focused and efficient, and before you know it, time flies by and you've accomplished quite a lot. So practice rhythms really do have many, many benefits, and I think that they're worth a try. So visit my website, print yourself a copy of the practice rhythms and give them a try with the all region music, with something else entirely different. It doesn't matter. See if they help you learn music more efficiently and more thoroughly. And please let me know if you think that they make a difference for you.